Hello, this is Charles Stovall, your Golden Harvest agronomist with your Agronomy in Action Focus Friday podcast here on June the 27th. Well, it's been a hot one out there this week, so let's get an update on heat unit accumulation, talk about how this heat is affecting our growing crop in reference to a concept of Leibig's barrel, and lightning bugs were spotted earlier this week, so let's talk about what's going on in our cornfields based on this observation. Let's begin, as usual, by talking about our current heat unit accumulation. Now, basing our heat unit counts on a planting date of May the 1st in the East Lansing area, we've now accumulated 731 heat units. Now, comparison, we are still down 158 heat units from last year, but only 54 heat units behind the 5-year average. Now, that's versus a 116 heat unit deficit last week versus the 5-year average. Now, if you're asking yourself, how can that be possible? The only explanation is that this same week last year must also have been hot. Probably also above that maximum temperature of 86 degrees. But on the 5-year average, this week has not been nearly as hot. Now, going south to Coldwater, we're 195 heat units behind last year and 100 behind the 5-year average. And finally, going north to that Mount Pleasant area, we're 102 units behind last year and 71 behind the 5-year average. So, as a whole, we are gaining on crop progress, especially relative to the 5-year average. And that, too, has been evident by the photos you all keep sending me of fast-growing corn and just some amazing-looking crops out there. So please keep those photos coming. I love to see those great photos of golden harvest, corn, and soybeans just growing strong. Now, as for the recent heat and its effect on our crops, I truly believe that its negative effects were relatively limited, except for those areas where we also got some of that spotty, heavy rains that laid down some of our crops. Now, the fact that most of the state received a good inch of rain prior to the heat, that helped our crops to buffer a lot of the negative effects of that high heat event, even though they may have shut down for a few hours each day. Now, it makes me think of Leibig's law of the minimum, which is often illustrated as Leibig's barrel. Now, this is a really vital concept that directly impacts crop growth success. Now, picture it, if you will, a wooden barrel made of staves of different lengths. Now, this is your crop's growth potential. Now, just as water in a barrel can only fill up to the height of the shortest stave, your crop yields are limited by the most deficient nutrient or growth factor. No matter how much nitrogen, or phosphorus, or heat, or optimal rain that you have, if your soil is deficient in any nutrient needed for crop production, that deficiency becomes your yield's limiting factor. For example, you might apply adequate nitrogen, have excellent rainfall, and even maintain proper plant population. However, if your soil pH is too low, it then becomes your limiting factor by reducing the different nutrients available to the crop. The same concept applies to physical factors like soil compaction or poor drainage. They too can become the shortest stave in your barrel. Now, by understanding and applying Leibig's law, you can systematically identify and correct limiting factors in your operation, optimizing inputs and maximizing yields. Now, remember, your crop yield will only be good as your most limiting factor allows. And if we keep getting this type of heat without adequate rains along the way, this too could become a yield limiting factor. Now, the other factor is the current stage of development of the crop. Heat and other stresses during V5 can negatively affect the number of rows around on the ears of our growing crop, and then stresses during that V6 through V8 stages can negatively affect the potential kernels long on our developing ears. So, time will tell, but we know for sure, this year's crop, it's just really developing fast right now. Now, I also wanted to mention that not only did I see lightning bugs for the first time earlier this week, so did one of our customers who texted me Monday morning to let me know that they were flying around in the Perry area. So if you're an avid listener, you may recall me talking other times about that correlation between lightning bugs and corn rootworm beetles. And as we have discussed, they're not related and their cycles of growth are not the same. But it does seem to follow that when lightning bugs are in their adult stage flying around, our corn rootworm beetles are changing from their egg stage to their larval or worm stage. Now, therefore, we're now entering the egg hatch stage of our corn rootworms in mid Michigan. I heard from another customer that they saw lightning bugs last week in southern Michigan, and I'm sure that my customers in northern Indiana and northern Ohio also probably started seeing them 7 to 10 days ago. Therefore, if you are raising corn on corn and if you want to evaluate the success or possible failure of your rootworm protection plan, these next weeks will be the ideal time to start digging up corn plants. Soaking those roots in buckets of water, looking for the rootworms themselves to float to the top of that water, and then checking for any feeding damage on those roots. This damage will continue on for the next few weeks while feeding's going on and until eventually then these larvae they'll pupate, and that's in course preparation for their adult stage life where they will then fly around and start trimming back the silks on our corn ears. Now, unfortunately, there is no rescue treatment for corn if you do find damage, but it will be valuable to be able to start to set yield and standability expectations on those fields. And if you happen to be unsuccessful in controlling rootworm this year, it gives us plenty of time to put a better plan in place for next year. So, as we wrap up this week's Agronomy in Action Focus Friday podcast, let's continue to walk our fields. Take a few minutes to think about the concept of Leibig's barrel and how this pertains to your own fields. Now, if you do have any corn on corn fields, start putting plans together to dig some roots and evaluate your situation, being sure to look in multiple areas of fields for that rootworm damage. Now, finally, I really hope that you're making some plans to get away to celebrate our nation's birthday coming up the end of next week. It's always a true blessing to be an active part of American agriculture. This is Charles Scoville, your Golden Harvest agronomist, with your Agronomy in Action Focus Friday. Have a great week.